This is a mad off-road bike. And this is an even madder off-road rider. Put the two together, and it's well worth watching. This is Better's 300cc two-stroke, and it's just been voted by a US magazine as the best dirt bike of 2013.
Well, the rider who was doing all that action obviously knows what he's doing, and it obviously wasn't either myself or Harry. This man is called Brian CAPPER, in case you hadn't recognised him, one of the best-known motorcyclists in South Africa. You were the guy putting it through its paces. Well, I'm going to ask you to give me some genuine feedback on this 300R. We've seen you riding it about. It looks like an amazing machine, but I think we have to get something out of the way first, and the fact is, this fella's been riding with Better for years and years and years, and you're now working with the Better importer in South Africa, so should I take what you say with a pinch of salt?
Yeah, you know, I mean, I've ridden the trials bike for many, many years, and honestly, you know, I tell people all the time that this bike is like a trials bike on steroids. You know, it's got horsepower, it's got suspension, and really it's phenomenal. And, you know, the guys at Cayenne are the real deal. You know, they put in their money where their mouths are.
What about the bike itself? You've had a chance, and you've obviously even raced for some of the bigger, more major brands. How does it compare, really, in terms of its handling, in terms of its engine? Does anything stand out as being better or weaker?
Well, you know, the biggest thing for me is the way this bike turns. You know, I just love the way that this bike can turn around on, you know, on itself quite easily. So that is for sure a very big thing. And the other massive plus for this bike is that it tracks through the rocks. You know, there's not many bikes out there that are really, really good at, you know, keeping their line going through really technical rocks. And I must be honest that the guys have done their homework right here, and this bike is really phenomenal in the rocks. You know, the other good thing about it is that the seat height is for sure lower than its competitors. So, you know, especially for the shorter guys, you know, when they're trying to dab, that's definitely a big plus. And then, of course, you know, the other big thing is that the center of gravity is lower because the starter motor is right in the middle of the crank casing. So, you know, the guys have done their homework here. I think that they've looked at all the other bikes and they've said, listen, how can we, you know, improve those bikes? You know, there isn't a bad bike out there at the moment.
300RR, 300cc two-stroke, it sounds pretty evil and intimidating to me. Is it something that a fairly novice rider could get to grips with, or should you start on something smaller in the range? That's
a brilliant question, Matt. You know, the good thing about this bike, with all the other manufacturers, you actually have to physically change the spring in the power valve. This bike, just with using an Allen key, you can turn it all the way in, which makes it super mellow like a trials bike, or you can turn it all the way out, and it's aggressive and really, really fast. I mean, there's not many bikes that'll stay with this one in this category.
Price? What is it like compared to its major manufacturers' opposition?
Matt, as far as I know, they're anywhere between 8 and 10 grand cheaper than their competitors. I hate using the word cheaper, but it's more affordable. And you know, as I say, you know, these guys are really putting in a big effort to put another brand out there, and it's nice to have some competition.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. It's at this point in the show that I would normally say, right, time to head off and do something else. But since we were Brian CAPPER, since we are at the end of this programme, and you're due a riding tip, I thought, well, why not? Let's do an off-road riding tip. We don't do them very often. Brian, I've got a question for you. I'm a novice. I'm going to head out for my first weekend's ride. Give me a couple of tips, easy-to-learn tips that will really suit me.
Yes, Matt, I've got a couple of riding tips for you, especially if you haven't got much experience in the dirt. The first problem that I find, Matt, is that most riders sit down when they ride, and unfortunately, when you're going through rough terrain like rocks or with whoops or anything like that, the suspension is doing its thing and your body weight is going in with everyone, so you're almost fighting against each other. So the first tip that I would certainly say is definitely a huge one, is to try and stand up as much as possible. The biggest problem that guys have is that they sit down too much and they sit too far back, but I'll go into that just now. So you want to be standing in a central position, your head over the handlebars. That's a really, really big thing. And you want to be able to let go with your hands and not hold on with your knees. Obviously, too far back without holding on, you're going to fall off the back of the bike. Too far forward, of course, you're going to fall over the front. So you want to stand in the middle of the bike. So you want to be central, head over the handlebars, and always looking ahead. The other big problem, as I say, is the guys sit down way too often. And when they sit down at the back end of the bike. Now, the problem when you're sitting at the back of the bike is the front is really light, and now the bike doesn't steer properly. So the biggest thing that you want to do is stand up as much as possible, and when you do come into a corner to sit down, is get your backside really far forward and weight the front wheel so that you can actually pivot around, around the front wheel. So I would say those are probably the two biggest tips that I can give you guys right now.